Thanks everyone for joining. I'm excited about this event. I hope you are as well. Before we start, I would like to have an acknowledgement. While we all may be in different locations today, I want to pause to acknowledge the land on which Vector is located in Toronto, what is now a meeting place for many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, as well as newcomers to Canada from around the globe. We acknowledge the land is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. To start with, climate change is on the minds of everyone right now. Climate change is affecting every single industry and every single individual across the globe. And that's not new for Canada or different for Canada as well. Many large and small enterprises across Canada are facing challenges and opportunities in this front. From natural disasters disrupting supply chains to operations being unpredictable due to changing weather patterns, and also the need for providing more resources with much lower carbon footprint is a big challenge which we are all facing. And every sector has a role to play in this. At the same time, the organizations are being prompted by the shareholders and consumers to help cultivate a better world without having, or I would say with having the right trade-off between profit and impact, specifically climate impact. Here at Vector, we are working with governments, large and small enterprises, as well as our research community to leverage AI in making the world a more sustainable place. Some of the examples of the work which we are doing in Vector include our collaboration with industry and researchers on using advanced machine learning methods for energy efficiency, building deep learning-based forecasting methods for predicting climate behaviors in near future, to mention a couple. And some of these enterprises are here with us today to share their learning, share their experiences in this domain and how AI is actually creating impact in the work that they are doing. With that, I would like to welcome our participants, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Let's go to Jaime first. Jaime, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Jaime Tatis. I have the pleasure of working at Telus, leading the data strategy and enablement team. In my current role, I work alongside different business units in order to make Telus a leading insights-driven company who leverage next-generation cloud-based architecture for enterprise and analytics and delivering coding, artificial intelligence, and machine learning capabilities to accelerate value creation. Just a little bit about Telus. So we are a dynamic, world-leading communications and information technology company with more than 16 million customer connections that span across wireless, data, IP, voice, TV, entertainment, video, security, and very importantly, healthcare and agriculture. We'll talk more during this fireside, of course, but needless to say, we're very committed to bridging the digital, social, and economic divides, and we do that by connecting people to what matters most to enable better health outcomes for Canadians, caring for the planet our children will live in, advance all the educational opportunities for our future leaders, and very importantly, keeping people safe in our digital world.
Thanks, Jaime. Let's go to Dan next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. And Deval, thank you for the introduction there. I'm Dan. I'm the Director of Technology at Aspire Food Group. And our organization exists to address the intractable challenge posed by how we have an ever-growing population of people while simultaneously having a shrinking number of resources necessary to produce food to sustain that population. Our chief insight is, taking advantage of climate-controlled vertical indoor agriculture environments to produce micro livestock, which is crickets. That's our main product, which happen to be an exceptional source of protein and can be produced in a scalable way. I'm thrilled to be participating in this discussion today, and even more so to be joined by two exceptionally innovative companies that have actually directly contributed to the success of Aspire.
Thanks, Dan. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Devil. I'm Jim Quisenberry. I'm from Magna International. And as one of the world's largest suppliers to the automotive space, Magna has a global team of 158,000 employees and a very unique organization structure that allows us to act a bit more like a startup. And I think that's unique and gives us some ability to take action on some of these maybe non-traditional automotive areas, such as climate impact, sustainability, social and governance. And that's very important to us. In my current role, I'm a director of research and development as part of our corporate team. And that responsibility is to look at new technologies that are emerging and go across the breadth and scope of Magna products to find the right fit. So I'm very fortunate to have this very wide view of new technology, but sometimes we can't go very deep into the technology. But that's my role currently, and I'm very happy to be here talking to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Before we join, for all the participants, if you have any questions, please use the question Q&A dialog box, and we will address them towards the end. So let's start with one of the things which I have been definitely thinking a lot about is IPCC recently released the third part of the three-part report. And how does each of your company approach that report, and what are some of the key learnings or areas for contributing towards the themes which are identified in that report? And let me start with Dan. There's a lot of mention around agriculture and sustainable food. So what are your thoughts on it, and how is Aspire tackling that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I'll be honest, I haven't read the full 3,700-page report. But some of my key takeaways from that were how, one, they did actually explicitly call out insects as a rich source of protein. And they also called out how increasing food production per unit of land is important. And that's something that we're able to do specifically at Aspire. I mentioned vertical farming as what our sort of objective is. And we're able to do that because we're dealing with a micro livestock. We're dealing with crickets. They're small. We can stack them. We can go vertical with it, which you couldn't do with cows, for example. Probably be a lot more difficult to stack cows in a 10-story high building. Not sure how you would accomplish that one. Additionally, there's a need to increase just diversification in the agriculture system, both from protein sources and from plant sources. And that's something that we're also bringing to the table there. And so from those aspects, I feel like we're on the right track, but there's obviously a lot more to do, especially when it comes to measuring sustainability impact. And that's something that we're very committed to, and that we are actually is at a core of why we chose crickets, because they happen to be a very efficient converter of input feed to output protein, more so than other animals.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Jaime, we'll go to you next. And as they say, like the best alternative energy is the energy which we don't use, right? And what are your thoughts on this? What role does telecommunication have to play in this transition as identified by this report?
Of course, thanks for the question. So for a telecommunication company or any technology company, we use a lot of equipment. So we have equipment rooms, data centers, and all this equipment generates an amount of heat that actually needs to be dissipated using cooling, air conditioning, so on and so forth. Also in Canada, we have an opportunity to have the 4 seasons. So you have heat and cold, and there's a lot of efficiencies you can gain by doing that. But one of the main roles that we play, as any other technology company plays, is the fact that we really believe that we have in Canada quite a unique opportunity on talent that we have in AI, with the potential to transform society, economic sectors, the human experience, and Telus for sure is striving to be a leading part of that movement. Thanks to great research as we have from Vector and a lot of collaboration across industry, we have the potential and possibility to be able to create solutions that not only help the company itself, but everybody else who wants to use it, and how we can collaborate with each other to make it better. I know we'll talk more throughout the conversation about the specific project that we open sourced recently. But one of the main things that we are collaborating on how to improve this is by open sourcing solutions that we believe not only are beneficial for the technology sector, but any other industry who wants to adopt it. And the main reason that we open source it is because we firmly believe that there's so much potential in this country that we can collaborate to make that code much better. And the better the code gets, the better for all of us. And the more we can export this internationally, the more we can have a footprint on how Canada is leading globally, how we're going to tackle these societal problems is going to be not only good for our industries, not only good for our research, but good for the entire world as well.
Thanks, Jaime. And yeah, I would reiterate, I think open source has a big role to play, and it is a big tool and a platform which brings in multi-stakeholders together on a shared goal, right? And so we'll definitely explore that further. Going to Jim, there has been a lot of enthusiasm, probably the most enthusiasm around decarbonization has been in transportation industry. And what's your reflection? How does Magna see this as an opportunity?
Great, thank you. Obviously, transport is a very highlighted section and one that Magna is in right now. As a supplier of components and systems, we are not always putting the end product out there for the customers to interface. So keep in mind that maybe we're a step in the back here, but there's tremendous opportunity to have an impact here with a shift from internal combustion engines to electrified powertrains. And I think it's a step. It's not the final answer. And I hope that most people agree with that. We have to do more. But within this, I think the report has identified a few cross-modal opportunities for mitigation. And one that's unique, and I think that's relevant to artificial intelligence, is what they categorize as eco-driving and driver education. So to me, that means when you have a new system in place and that system provides a few different functions, one of which is propulsion to get you from A to B, and another is to conserve as much energy as possible, I think a heavy dose of education is very helpful there. But, and I hope we can go into this later, how do we make that match to the individual user, the individual route that they may be driving, and the best or most optimized use of their system being an electrified propulsion system?
Thanks, Jim. And maybe let's continue on this, right? Like we don't have to go into it later. Let's go into a little bit more details on how you see AI specifically play a role in this. What are the opportunities? And I think we would all appreciate if there's any, I know like Magna has been working on really interesting, very specific problems where AI is being deployed, right? So would love to learn more in depth about that, right?
Okay, I have to acknowledge the biggest one is computer vision. I think in automotive, everyone knows that computer vision and the path towards autonomous driving is heavily reliant on computer vision models and AI there. It does play a role, but I think in general, if we're talking about energy optimization, we're talking about a statistical set of information. And in order to get to something that's meaningful that we can train an algorithm on, we have to have the right representation of that data. And that's not an easy problem to solve. The way that it's typically been approached in the past is you have a standardized drive cycle, and you can measure A to B and compare different systems and automobiles on that standardized drive cycle, but it doesn't capture the day-to-day usage and how you may drive differently than I may drive and what my preferences may be. So they were not able to truly capture the eco-driving mode and how someone can balance those trade-offs between propulsion and energy mitigation or savings. So how do we go about collecting the data that we need. Maybe this is a good interface with the network infrastructure. If we want a lot of data, because more data leads to better models, how do we ensure that we have the bandwidth on the network to do that? How do we ensure that we can annotate and label the information properly and keep up to date with the usage of it? So those are just a few of the areas where I think we have opportunity to explore, and some of the things that we're working on currently.
Thanks, Jim. And a quick follow-up on that. So this is 100% agree, this is a complex problem. And computer vision has been one of those mature technologies which is now being widely adopted. What do you see the role of a for-profit company in responsible adoption of it? Right, there's been a lot of recent research and also discourse on the fairness and biases within those models. They become even more important when they are deployed and when they're touching people's lives every day, right? How does Magna approach that?
Very carefully. Very, very carefully. We have mechanisms in place in the automotive industry. ISO standards is one. So 26262 kind of is an overriding guideline for how to develop a safe system and then put that system into practice. If we follow that back, we see the interactions that a machine learning algorithm or computer vision algorithm would play. So how reliant are we on that computer vision program identifying properly the object in front of it has to be proven with statistical data. Our approach to that is to work with our automotive OEMs, work with the governing bodies and the guidelines set forth in ISO to make sure that we have the statistical representation of that. In summary, that means we've collected enough real-world data and we have enough additional data. I'm going to call that maybe simulation type data. And I think this is something that Waymo is doing to get to the tens of billions of miles driven using synthetic data balanced with real world data collection. And over time, the maturity grows, the confidence grows, and the capabilities can grow. So we can't just do everything at once. We have to be certain that it's proven in safe use in a certain geographic area first.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Let's go on to I have to say I'm biased about this use case because I was involved in it hands-on. And so, Jaime, can you tell us a bit more about the collaboration effort where Telus has open sourced the energy optimization project for HVACs in the data centers? More specifically, we see an opportunity for AI, but what are the challenges, right? How did Telus go from, say, oh, this is a promising research application to actually deploying it and optimizing energy use in the data centers?
Of course. Thanks for the question. So I will explain a little bit more about that use case that we call the EOS, which stands for Energy Optimization System. So it's an AI-enabled system that helps to fine-tune heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, so HVAC systems, in network locations to reduce energy consumption. And in turn, of course, reduce the operational cost and the carbon footprint for both. As I mentioned before, data centers are part of any technology industry critical infrastructure. Of course, it's the same for Telus. They are needed to run all the data center operations. Keeping these systems, these rooms cool requires a lot of energy. In fact, if I recall, there's documentation that already in 2014, so this is like 8 years ago, around 2% of all the electricity consumed in the US was to cool down data centers. You can only imagine that the number is much higher now after 8 years. We found that current HVAC systems don't fully take advantage of changes in weather or natural changes in temperature to optimize cooling efficiency. So we acknowledge that even a small percentage efficiency gain can result in significant energy savings at a scale. So what it was done in EOS is the teams were together, of course, with Vector, and they created a reinforcement learning solution, which is very analog to how humans and animals interact with their environment. You know, when children are learning to walk, they fall, they learn that, you know, you make an undesirable action, it could, you know, make a fall happen. So you start to learn based on rewards and failures. So for the for this system, for the EOS, it learns from the historical data captured from the data room where it was tested, and the indoor and outdoor temperature and the on-off status of the air conditioning, the free cooling, and the heater. And one of the exciting things that were found out of the EOS system is that we observed the agent, for example, was able to learn different strategies on how to optimize cooling, including pre-cooling, using free cooling during cool early mornings, also not running the compression for a set amount of time, but adjusting it according to conditions. So when we tested it and we saw that it was working, we had internal debate. Well, what do we do with it now? And our answer quickly was, well, we should open source it. And the opportunity to open source it was not random. We are actively contributing to the energy management community, and for sure we want to continue to do our part, the leading part, on how we support a low carbon future and help others to do the same. For Telus, open sourcing is an important aspect of building solutions to collective challenge like climate change. This is how you make an impact, by allowing the larger community to improve the software and the algorithms and technologies, and that way we can all move faster. Like we believe that we can help other industries and organizations reduce their electricity consumption and carbon footprint by implementing similar methods. And for example, in Telus, we're working to achieve our goal to be net carbon neutral by 2030, while also producing 100% of our electricity requirements from renewable or low emitting sources by 2025. So when you combine all this, our decision was very clear. We want to open source it. As I was mentioning before, when you hear Jim's words, when you hear Dan's words, like there's so much talent and potential in this country. The more we contribute, the more we help on the things that we can help. And societal changes and challenges are something that we must help each other. We live in one planet, we live in this island. We have to help it to be able to reduce emissions, to have a continuous good food supply. What Dan was speaking to Jim's point, ensuring that actually we can have very high confidence solutions for self-driving cars and reducing deaths and accidents on the roads. I truly believe that we have all the potential required in this country. We can lead it by open sourcing it. Our hope is that we have, not only in Canada, but globally, a lot of people that share the same mindset as we do and be able to contribute on these projects to make it much better.
Yeah, thanks, Jaime. And I would reiterate, I think Canada has a leading position in AI, and how can we leverage that and then keep that, contribute using that to not just Canada, but globally. And I think this is a great effort in that direction. A follow-up on that, I think, is what was the journey like to deploy this system? We hear a lot about change management and technology adoption journey within large corporations. What was it like for you, from going from, say, this works to actually deploying it?
Indeed. So as you can imagine, before we deploy it, there was a lot of rigor and testing that we needed to do before we put it in the real equipment room to actually go and have any issues that we cannot afford. So before it was deployed, there was a lot of simulation happening. So we were able to use all the information collected from what the HVAC controller was doing. So we could see all the historical information of the different changes together with weather. And we were able to replicate it in an environment, and by software ensure that the agent and the environment were working properly. When the team had a good confidence that that was good enough, then we put it on the real environment. And actually we were able to see the effects. If I recall correctly, in the computer, the simulation estimations was a 15% reduction of electricity consumption. In the real life environment was 12 to 13%, which is really good. Many times you see on the computer is maybe like 50% more or so. In this case, was very, very close to it. So we're really happy with it. Now, one of the questions is, well, what is the best way to fast track it? How can we get every HVAC controller that we use, or anybody else is using the country, using similar technology to be able not only to reduce the energy consumption, but also reducing the carbon footprint? And that was the decision to open source. Yes, we could have gone and do it for every single room at every controller and do it ourselves, but that would have taken more time. And that would be a very niche isolated solution. And as I mentioned before, like our whole objective, like we truly believe that making good for the community, making good for society is good for business. They go hand in hand. So that was the clear decision for us that, okay, now that we know it's working, now we know it's not going to break anything, we have a good confidence to release it and, open source it and have the community to be able to enhance it and make it better.
Thanks, Jaime. Dan, so recently, first of all, congratulations on being recognized by IRCAI. And tell us more, right? What was the use case, and how is Aspire using AI to optimize and to be more sustainable?
Yeah, thank you. And that award was really an effort of a full company. Everyone here has been pulling very hard over years, and to be recognized in that way is obviously very, very fulfilling and validating for the work that we're doing. But to your question, I actually want to tie it back to what Jaime was saying, because that's relevant to what we're doing. We use AI as a means of optimizing the environmental controls in our the space where we raise our crickets. So we actually have a fleet of 5,000 IoT devices that we've developed with Telus and their partners. They're connected using a Telus private 5G cellular network within our facility that allows us to backhaul that data to our data centers where we can process it, then feed it through an AI, which will extract those insights that we're looking for. What is the right temperature? What's the right humidity? What's the right concentrations of these sort of gas characteristics, and other factors as well. So we can then feed that back into our operation and tune that. And Jaime, what you're saying about weather was just spot on. And that's something that we're, actively incorporating into what we're doing. We, from both how we built the building to the location of it, and also trying to, be as energy efficient as possible in these environmental controls in these tweaks that we're doing. So, can we maybe reduce the temperature a little bit, use a little less energy when it's going to be really hot out, because that'll help balance the temperature to where we want it to be. Something like that is just right in line with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and it also mentions that comparatively, you would be 40% lower to say something like farm salmon or organic chicken and turkey. And how do you even make that comparison? What is that unit, right? And then what are, say, key areas that you are focusing on to get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of that prediction, that 40% lower, that's based on projections that either we've conducted through third parties or on existing research. They're going to remain projections until we finish our facility in London, Ontario, and can actually start gathering that data. But what it comes down to is the biology of the organism is really important there. And we're fortunate to be using crickets, which have a very high or very advantageous feed conversion ratio. I had mentioned this earlier, but feed conversion is sort of how much feed do we put in and how much usable protein do we get out. And crickets are remarkably efficient, and really insects in general tend to be very efficient sort of reactors for this. And that's one of the chief ways that we're able to drop our emissions impact. Really just by exploiting the biology of an organism like that sort of has that natural tendency towards requiring less natural resources to maintain.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Switching gears a little bit, zooming out and maybe focusing more on industry wide, what do you see as some of the gaps within your respective industries and how AI and technology can help address those gaps towards reaching the goal of net negative economy, right? So I'll start with Dan. What are the gaps in agriculture in general, and where do you see biggest opportunities there, and how AI can help?
Yeah, I think so. With AI generally in agriculture, I think there's as you move away from the source, as you move away from the farm, I think you start seeing more technological adoption, right? You see more data collection, more use cases for AI, and I think we're kind of forgetting about that source. And I'd like to see a push more towards getting technology, getting sensors, getting data, and then being able to respond and sort of operationalize that at the farm level, which we're able to do just by a factor of us, being an indoor farm like we are. And I think that some of those aspects could be hopefully leveraged by other organizations as well, or other sort of farming practices. There's been a push towards soil moisture monitoring, right? That's a big one. If we are monitoring our soil moisture, then maybe we don't have to use as much water on that farm. That would be a huge resource savings if we could somehow do that globally right away. So I see kind of a hole for ag in general in data availability at the farm level. Certainly, if I'm pulling it back to the insect industry, there's quite a big data gap in insects, generally speaking, and that's something we're trying to address with this facility, which will actually be the first time that data at this scale will be able to be captured on insects. That will hope will be useful not just to us, but to the industry as a whole.
Thanks, Dan. Jim, so we discussed that AI is already being used in transportation industry, but what are some of say lesser invested or less focused areas that you can identify where AI can play a role towards transitioning to negative carbon or net zero transportation?
I would have to say it's probably with the manufacturing side of automotive. We, as an industry, still rely on some heavier metals, some larger equipment. And if we look at that all the way through its lifetime, we need to start factoring in all elements of that. So from mining this rare earth out of the ground until it has reached its end of use in life, and the manufacturing processes and the logistics involved with making that happen. I think that's an area where artificial intelligence and new efforts of research would certainly push it forward a bit and make a big impact. As I'm listening to Dan and Jaime talk about what they can do for operations, I put that together with Magna's willingness to scale. Even just within our own organization, 348 manufacturing facilities across the globe, there's a big impact. And I think more open source, more collaboration across industries would help to find some synergies in manufacturing, logistics, and essentially find a better way. And I may not be the expert in the AI approach to do that, but hopefully some of the community here that's listening can help drive us forward in that.
Thanks, Jim. Jaime, I know Telus touches way more industries than what is perceived just as telecommunication. So would love to hear your thoughts on where you are seeing AI play a role in transitioning to a more sustainable world.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So yes, we have far more than telecommunications. So we are in health and agriculture, and there's many examples I can cite on many different projects and leads that we're doing. But we truly believe that AI has the potential to transform society, to transform our industries, and for me, there's so much power on on data. And actually, Jim was alluding same as that. And sometimes we need more data. We need to break data silos. We need to be able to help each other so we can have more information to train better models. So I find that we still have work to be done across all industries on the ability for AI to unlock hidden insights across disparate and silo data sets to drive new efficiencies, which in an ideal world will provide cost savings for enterprises, but be more importantly, to lead to better outcomes for people and the planet. I truly believe AI can help us discover new ways of not only optimizing things like energy, but food and food supply and all these different topics that the different panelists have talked today. And if you look at telecom, right, like when you look at AI-driven insights, I believe they will enable stronger and more energy-efficient networks, particularly as we expand our 4G footprint across the country. And I heard Jim mentioning, well, one of the things we'll need is also fast networks and reliable networks to bring all this data so we can take it in and do stuff with that. And that's exactly what we're doing as we deploy 5G. We increase the speeds that we can get to. It's all tied to each other. So you need the data fast, you need reliable infrastructure, you need to break data silos so you can have more data to do it. So I believe we still have a lot of work to do there globally. We're making progress, but we're not there yet.
Thanks, Jaime. We talked about technology, and that is definitely the focus of discussion here. But I like to believe that technology, society, and regulation, they all go hand in hand with open markets. What are your thoughts on what role does regulation and government play in expediting this transition? And I'll start with Jaime, working in a highly regulated or somewhat regulated industry.
Yeah, so for me, really the role of government is how can it help? And I think that's what Vector is doing, right? Like one of your main funding bodies is government. And one of the main things for me is how the government can help the country get more people trained on AI. How can they help fund more research? How can they help the industries to be able to collaborate better? How can they remove barriers to actually allow us to enable that even faster? So that is the main help we need, is how can we go faster? How can we do it, of course, securely, with privacy in mind, with all the right guardrails, but how can we accelerate? As I was mentioning, we as a planet, we still have a lot of siloed data. We need to collaborate more. We need more open source. And the more anybody can help us doing that, the government, of course, playing a big factor, is more than welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jaime. Jim, your thoughts on this?
It's a very interesting question. Thank you for bringing it up. I would qualify it as what can regulation do to help move us forward as staying agile, being flexible to kind of recognize that the first approach wasn't enough or had some longer term unintended consequences. So let's reframe this and let's put a governance structure in place to allow that to happen. And this is coming from the example of the autonomous driving guidelines from NHTSA quite a few years ago. I think those were well intended, and from my observation, it led to a giant leap forward. It enabled more companies to be active in that space. It drove more funding in that area, and it led to the education of society about this. But now we're seeing that it wasn't quite the end solution. So how do we deal with that? As long as they can deal with that in a somewhat fast manner, which is a monumental task, I understand. But if you can stay a little bit ahead of industry where the masses need to be, then I think that would be very helpful in driving things around sustainability and climate change forward.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I definitely agree with you. I think government has the potential with regulations, right regulations, to expedite the transition, create the right incentives and guardrails in which we can make this transition equitable for everyone. Dan, agriculture is a top priority for governments over the world? And how does this affect, and what is the role government should play in that sector?
That's a great question. And as I see it, one of the biggest role government can play is to encourage or foster collaboration across industries. And I'm saying that from my perspective in Aspire. We are involved with the Canadian government through SDTC, which is the Sustainable Development Technology Agriculture. Sustainable Development Technology Canada. And also through NGen, which is the next generation manufacturing supercluster. And what we were able to do through NGen with Telus coming into that as well is it's a collaboration where we are getting government funds to bring people who have, or companies that have domain expertise like Telus in handling large quantities of data or connecting devices, cellular data being critical to our application here. And AI solutions together to create a solution that's greater than the sum of its parts. So we are getting, as Aspire, it's absolutely enabled this facility that we're building in Canada to move forward. And out of this collaboration, we're getting IP and technology that we need for our organization that we can carry forward and we can build upon. Telus is earning IP as well that they can take into other industries, as well as a showcase of their talent as just a leader in telecommunications and on agriculture. And then our other partners through this project are also earning their own pieces of it that are greater than what they would otherwise have. So that, as I see it, is the biggest role government can play in sort of fostering those collaborative environments and helping to govern how that looks.
Thanks, Dan. Zooming even out a little bit and say this question is, there's a lot of consensus that the business models which got us here need to change if we were to reach our goal of a net negative carbon economy. Let's say we reach that goal. What are the new business models that you envision will help us get there? Let's start with Jaime this time.
New business models that are going to enable to enhance the collaboration.
Yeah, to reach our goals, our sustainable development goals.
Yeah, so I honestly find you're just listening to some of them as we speak, right? So when you listen to Dan, like I love what they're doing with their plans and like they need to be able to have reliable communications. They need to have data coming from hundreds and thousands of IoT devices to be able to have real-time functions that allows them to get that data ingested, have models who can work really fast with it and make decisions on that. You have Jim also talking about how he needs some advances on computer vision, be able to get more data so they can train models faster. And like I find already in these conversations, you're listening to many different ideas that can be taken to the next step. For me, my point is, if out of a room of 45 minutes, we can come with a few ideas out of this panel of 4 people, imagine having now 100 people, 200 people, 1,000. So for me, we have to start talking. So many times we always go back to our silos worlds, and we are very focused on our immediate, I need to accomplish this in the next quarter by the year end. But having the time to set aside that operational view and be able to have wider conversations on what are the opportunities to help each other with our goals fully aligned. And I think that as you listen to these different companies talking here, we're all aligned on the goals that I believe that we're looking into. How can we do good for business, but doing good for business totally aligns with doing good for the community, doing good for the planet. And there's a lot of empathy on that and a lot of willingness to collaborate and open up. So my answer is we need to talk more. And I find that Vector is very well positioned to help the industries in the country to be able to carry this conversation forward and find a long list of other opportunities that we can move to.
Yeah, thanks, Jaime. And I 100% agree. I think one cross-business, cross-sector collaboration will unlock a lot of new business models. And I am also, Vector is committed to facilitating that. And one of the modes which we work in Vector is the collaboration project, where we bring in people from all different industrial sectors to work on projects together, right? So I think we will do more specific projects around climate change, but Vector is definitely wants to be the catalyst towards accelerating this change. Jim, from your perspective, what are some of these, say, newer business models which will create, say, value for the transportation industry, but beyond that, right?
I really like what Jaime said about alignment of goals. While I don't have an example of a new business model right now to give you, I think it comes out of that discussion that multiple cross-industry companies or even multiple companies within the same industry are aligned on something such as safety as opposed to profit. Now, if you strip away the profit aspect from it and have a group of people who are very intelligent and motivated to improve safety, I think you'll come up with quite a few creative ways to make that business model work. The same thing I hope can be done for climate. If we want to have an impact, let's get the stakeholders together, put it aside, align on a common goal, and out of that should come the new business model.
Thanks, Jim. Dan, your business model is somewhat innovative in itself, right? And focusing on a very niche segment of agriculture. But beyond that, right? How did you come up with, say, how do you decide that this is where we should focus, where Aspire can create a change, and this is a unique opportunity compared to the rest of the agriculture sector?
In terms of going for insects.
Yep.
Yeah, it started back in 2014 when our company won the Hult Prize, and our founders were trying to address food sustainability and food insecurity. And they looked around and rightly saw that, hey, entomophagy, so eating insects, is actually widespread. And if you look into what literature there is on insects and compared to other protein sources, there's not as much. It seems like they're highly nutritious as well. And so that became the sort of how we focused on insects. And we've done some work in other areas of the globe. In the West, where we're really seeing food sustainability be the issue. And we have food insecurity, food sustainability, kind of two sides of the same coin almost. We want to come in with an insect that's easy to farm in that environment, and easy to incorporate into supply chains, other local supply chains as well. So pet food is an industry that we supply as well as human food. And I think that our customers, to your earlier question as well about how business models that need to change, I think our customers are well aligned with our mission and vision and want to see the impact, the climate impact of what we're doing. And I think that putting a price on carbon or increasing transparency across supply chains will be critical for that. And Jaime, Jim, what you're saying, I could not agree more with about increasing that collaboration, increasing that communication, and that exchange of data, so everyone can learn and benefit from that. And I think that'll be sort of an important aspect to see fleshed out and sort of grow over the next few years.
Thanks, Dan. A slightly different question. I like the emphasis on collaborations and cross business collaborations, and I think that is where a lot of value is yet to be extracted because of the silos in which a lot of businesses work. As we look externally at what is happening in the space at the intersection of AI and sustainability, are there any specific projects or use cases that you have recently observed which you're super excited about, right? Outside of what your day job is. And who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. Something that I am very excited about that in full transparency, we are just starting to get into right now too, is digital twins. And that's being an application of AI. If you don't know, imagine having a a digital version of your facility where you can control everything about it. Every aspect of that facility can be manipulated in a sort of digital virtual mock-up of it. And that allows you to do some really cool things. It allows you to sort of tweak aspects of your process or tweak environmental conditions, change the weather outside. Not easy to do that. Haven't found out how to do that yet. And then to make decisions based on what you learned there. And I am seeing that not only in industry, but even in municipalities. So the city of Austin, I'm based in Austin, Texas. The city of Austin is currently doing this where they're working to build a digital twin of the entire city to look at the effects on transportation or traffic flow or other sort of civil issues that could be going on, and then to be able to react to that in the physical world. So that creates, it's a tremendous tool to, with very low impact or risk once it's built, be able to tweak these things and see what happens before you go and invest all the physical resources and talent to do that. That I've been just blown away with what's going on there.
Thanks, Dan. Jim?
One thing we're doing that's interesting in this area, I think, of getting back to the first comments on how we understand the individual user of a vehicle. Having the algorithms that can digest data at the edge and basically make recommendations on what that user's preferences are. And as we relate that to driver assistance, this is where we are right now. It's not related to climate, but from a safety aspect, does that user prefer to follow vehicles closer or further away? And what we hope that does is enable a more intuitive use of the system, which we hope leads to a higher adoption rate. And if more people adopt the safety mechanisms on the car, then we're headed towards a safer place. And all of that's because of research done on artificial intelligence, managing the large data, and being able to process that on constrained devices in an automobile.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Jaime.
Well, there's many things. Just to keep it on the same realm of projects that we're talking about. So one of the things that we're looking into is what is the evolution of the work that we did on the energy consumption reduction piece, right? So we're looking into how can we apply that to boiler rooms? How can we apply it to buildings? How can we apply it to a lot of different things? So it's how can we make the code more and more reusable so it's easier to pick the parts that you can reuse for other cases. And as other points of that code gets developed, it's easier to plug them into the other ones to ensure that actually we can go faster to it. So I love the digital twin point that Dan was talking about. So I was reading about that as well. We try to do that, not at that level yet, but we try our best to be able to make things look like they will in real life in software to try to see what effects can happen. That's what we did before we actually put this EOS system on the live equipment room. We have to do a digital twin, maybe not as good as what Austin, Texas did, but it was good enough to ensure we wouldn't break it. So that is a very important part. And I find the more and more input that we go into more use cases that, that there's a huge risk just to go right away and put a new code to run something. It's something that, we are looking into it. And, that's something we're more than open to share as well. How are we doing it and what we're learning through it?
Yeah, thanks, Jaime. I think there's a lot of application from fundamentally like for optimization across the industries and how we can use some of this deep learning based and reinforcement learning based methods within that realm. Last question. Hopefully we all agree that we as a society need to transition to net negative and net zero. My question is, when will that happen according to you? One, when will it happen in Canada? And second, when will it happen globally? What is your forecast? I'll start with Dan. What year?
What year? Let's see. Difficult question there. I think there's a few things that need to happen before we get to that point. And I think it is going to come down to education consumer education as well. I think we also need to be talking about the same problem. And I know that's been a theme we've chatted about a bit here already. When we say food waste or when we say food loss, what does that mean? How do we define that? How do we measure that? And I think until we have that, it'll be difficult for us to reach that. Though with all the developments that we're seeing and the way industry is really grabbing onto these concepts and running with them, I would say conservatively, and this is not where I'm great at estimating things, 2040 maybe. I think there's a lot of work to do on the consumer side as well, that just throwing technology at it won't solve all the problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's jot down Dan for 2040. Jaime, how about yourself?
Yeah, so actually we have a very public target. So we're working to achieve our goal to be net carbon neutral by 2030. So we have a very specific target. And the other one we have is that we are procuring 100% of our electricity requirements from renewable or low emitting sources by 2025. So those are very public targets that we have. And even, very public as well is the fact that we announced, and we're doing right now, sustainability linked bonds. So that's, our commitment to environmental sustainability that links financing to achieving our operational net carbon neutral target of 2030. So we're very vocal about it. We have sustainability bond linked to it. So we are all in for it. So our target is clear, and we are working in every possible angle we have to achieve it, including the work that we're doing with Vector and more things that we have in the funnel.
Yeah, Jaime, I'll still push you once again for your forecast on when world will transition to net zero.
When will the world?
Yes.
Well, if Telus is transitioning to 2030, I'm very much hoping that it doesn't take much longer for the rest of the world to catch up and be there. So for the sake of our children and the new generations, I'm hoping it doesn't take us too long.
Awesome. Thanks, Jaime. Jim.
Oh, first of all, thank you for this question that challenges me to think broad and big. It's not easy. It also reminds me of a game, and I'm going to try to take the tactical approach of putting a number out there that is close enough but doesn't go over the limit. It's not too far out there. So the easy one would be 2041, just after what Dan's prediction is. But in reality, looking a little bit deeper, I think we'll see it happen in pockets first. And then we have to build that out and make the connections and take what's successful. There's going to be failures along the way. We should celebrate those failures. We should try to get to those failures sooner. And to that end, I think we're, as a world, closer to 2045. I was going to say 2050, but 2045 is the optimist in me.
2045. Okay, yeah, and I agree, Jim. I think as the saying goes, like the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And so I 100% agree that the transition will happen at different paces in different domains and different locations. Let's open up for questions. I do see a few questions here. The first question is for Dan. How does Aspire face the challenge of offering an unconventional food supply like crickets to a population that does not usually consume them and would most likely prefer traditional meat? And if I may add, there's another layer is a lot of population is transitioning away from meat-based food. So how do you see Aspire position itself with these challenges?
That's a great question. Certainly, it's been probably one of the biggest hurdles, right? How do we introduce a novel source of food to people that most people would probably look at and not only wouldn't consider it food, but wouldn't want to get anywhere near it. That's a unique issue, though, depending on where you are in the world. If you go to Mexico, you'll have chapulines, right? Grasshoppers on plenty of things. And if you go to Ghana, Africa, the palm weevil larva is a local delicacy. You go to Thailand, crickets. So it's a cultural question, first of all, and it's region dependent as well. But the way we try to address it is by trying to educate users, or not users, my software background talking for a second, trying to educate consumers about really what it is, and that trying to get people to just try it. It's takes a little bit of courage if you're trying just a whole cricket that's been roasted and seasoned and stuff. It doesn't taste like much. They just sort of have a nutty texture, takes on whatever flavor you give it, and then they melt away. But kind of getting people to put in a little bit of courage to try that. Maybe the first time someone tried sushi or something, you probably had a similar response. And then, sorry, and there was a second part of your question as well. What was that?
Yeah, so the second part is the challenge where a lot of consumers are moving completely away from meat or animal-based products for food. And how do you see Aspire positioning itself with that change?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I haven't thought about how we position ourselves in a world moving away from meat generally. I would say that outside of human consumption, another focus of ours is pet food, and that is especially with the trends that you've seen, where people take care of their pets better than they take care of themselves a lot of the time, and I think that's an absolute easy win for us to still try and offset less sustainable protein sources by if we can take a chunk out of some protein, call it chicken or beef or whatever that's going into pet food, replace that with cricket protein, which we've shown has a fantastic nutritional profile and is easily digested, then we're still achieving our goals, and we're raising insects as a protein source, and we're meeting our sustainability mission. And I guess we're sidestepping to a degree the sort of human consumption side, because I don't think it's fair to try and force animals that may not normally eat vegetables all the time to eat vegetables. Humans want to change their eating habits, that's fine. But I think there's always going to be a need for animal-based protein for our furry friends.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. There's another question for Jaime. So Telus recently launched Telus Agriculture. What are the opportunities for data strategies in agriculture sector?
So many. So I'll just put some quick examples of certain things that we're doing, maybe to put it into context. So one of the projects that we're working on, just as an example, is we're working on a solution to read and verify food packaging labels using AI. So in the UK, for instance, mislabeled food is thrown out because it cannot be sold that way. So if you have any food mislabeled, you have to throw it out, even if it's perfectly good to eat. And that represents a £60 million problem for the UK supermarket chain. So with AI, for example, we can help food producers catch mislabeled food and replace the labels before it reaches the store, and that prevents a lot of food waste. And the other thing I will touch base, I know the question was about agriculture, but also for Telus Health, for instance. So recently also working with Vector, we work on the use of AI for COVID long haul report and understanding the symptoms that those persons affected with it face. And I find that there's like a plethora of opportunities when you look at health, when you look at food, when you look at environment. There's a never-ending list of different things that we can do. Food, health, pollution. Those are one of the three more iconic societal problems we need to overcome. We're very passionate about all the work and the capabilities we have to be able to address it.
Thanks, Jaime. Jim, I have a question for you from me. You briefly mentioned about the potential in manufacturing. Can you tell us a bit more about how Magna is using AI in that realm?
Certainly. Those use cases today are related to typical manufacturing processes. So in some ways they relate to climate, but it's not the first objective. The first objective is efficiency. So we have efforts in material flow, material handling, warehouse optimization, and on the actual production line itself. And if we put a collaborative robot into that line, there's plenty of opportunity for AI. Again, we have sensors on that collaborative robot, we have path planning, we have the safety mechanism for them to be able to interact with humans. I think I have to be inspired here a little bit also to look at sustainability in the manufacturing, and being early in the research realm here at Magna, push us forward a little bit to see what can we do to optimize our energy efficiency across all of our manufacturing. So I think those are the areas where we want to focus related to manufacturing.
Thanks, Jim. There are a couple of interesting questions for you, Dan. One is how a cricket farm would function in areas of Africa where water is scarce, and how large of a community could a farm feed?
That is an interesting question. I mentioned to Africa earlier with palm weevil larvae specifically. That was in Ghana. I think the answer is you don't try and put a square peg through a round hole. I think we would look for an insect in the region that might be a delicacy, like I had mentioned, or look for an insect that would otherwise be non-disruptive to that ecosystem and easy to manage in that environment. I don't think we would necessarily, and I haven't looked into this, maybe crickets would work great there. But I don't think what we would do is try and walk in and just force crickets into a specific region. Our first look would be to try and incorporate what culturally makes sense in that area. In terms of how large a community could a farm feed, it depends on the size of the farm, I guess. There's a few factors in that. I suppose it's a little hard to give a specific on that, but certainly a facility the size that we're doing in Canada right now could feed a lot of people. A smaller operation, like even what we have in Austin, Texas, fewer. I can't give a more specific one on that.
Yeah, no, thanks. There's another question around the theme of non-meat products. So how does cricket compare to beyond meat products in terms of protein per 100 grams, and also in terms of GHG emissions? Have you made those comparisons?
I specifically am not sure on that one. I know our comparisons to other meat products. I don't know about Beyond Meat personally. I'm sure someone in our organization does, though. So I don't want to give bad information on that. So I would like to kind of defer that. But I would be happy to follow up after this with someone and connect them to someone in our organization who could probably answer that.
Thanks, Dan. There is one last question here, which we can take. It's for Jim. What do you think the barrier to adopting AI more broadly in transportation truly is to support sustainable initiatives?
Good question. I think, and Jaime hinted at this earlier with data silos, breaking those down, but maybe it's more a combination of data silos that exist and the business model. If we look at the industry, a lot of the AI solutions are developed by the component supplier, so a tier 2 or tier 3 supplier, and they need to fit into the infrastructure of the OEM. And if we walk this through and think about if we have a widget and that widget promises to improve sustainability at the individual level, let's say it gives them the ability to optimize their journey, the data silos and business model in place prevent it in a way that you have to be able to collect that data. And working in an OEM infrastructure means that you either have to tailor that solution specifically for that OEM and then do it again and again for each new OEM. So it kind of limits the scope of how you can reuse and sell that product. Or you have to come up with a creative business model that kind of opens that data up and allows the OEM to be the interface with it. And going back to business models and for-profit companies, there's a conflict there, a natural conflict. So if we can break those down, I think we'll have a new business model and fewer data silos, leading to maybe more collaboration and more open source. Gets us part of the way there.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks everyone for joining. We know climate change is one of the largest challenges we face as humanity. I agree, and I believe that AI has a big role to play in reaching our targets towards a more sustainable society. And cross-industry, cross-segment collaborations will bring in new business models and immense value for both the world and for-profit corporations of every single size. We at Vector are committed to continuing this dialogue and sharing stories like this with everyone, and helping companies and governments take advantage of AI in supporting sustainability. Thanks everyone for joining. It was a pleasure having you. And all the audiences, please reach out if there are any other questions which are unanswered. We would be happy to facilitate that conversation. Thanks and have a great day.